Welcome to the Tech Transform podcast by Oliver Wight Asia Pacific. I'm your host, Hozack, and for the first time since Oliver Wight started the business more than 50 years ago, I'm going to talk tech. With a wealth of experience in melding technology with business processes, I'm excited to face up to the challenge we're all going to have. How do we leverage the tools and data we have now and capitalize on what's coming without ending up with an assortment of uncoordinated tools and data sets? After all, the goal in business should still be for everyone to be working to the same destination and same set of plans. We want to be with you on the journey, and as we learn, we want to share and help you navigate through this era where tech integration is going to be essential for maintaining competitiveness and relevance. Our mission is to provide you with actionable insights and strategies that will keep you ahead in this dynamic tech environment. We've lined up a number of experts in planning systems and data management who are in the trenches to give you a hands-on view and not just the latest bright, shiny objects. We'll explore transformative insights from the last 30 to 50 years and peer into the future of tech in business planning. So be prepared to be inspired and equipped to face the changing tide of technology. So let's tech transform with Oliver Wight, navigating today, shaping tomorrow, and giving your career a head start by staying ahead of the tech curve. Welcome, Olga. I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. A little bit of background for Olga. She's a mastermind in integrated business planning and a qualified agile leader with a rich background in finance and data science and a proven record of leading transformation initiatives across various industries. Olga brings a unique blend of expertise to our discussion today. In this episode, Olga will delve into the critical importance of data in making business decisions. With her extensive experience in leveraging data to enhance operational efficiencies and decision-making processes, she's here to shed light on how well-structured and actionable data is foundation to successful business planning. Get ready to gain valuable insights on maximizing your data's potential to not only make better decisions, but also prepare your business for the challenges and opportunities ahead. Let's dive into the data vortex with Olga and help you continue the journey to transform your approach to business planning. So Olga, question one, what are the steps organizations can take to leverage their data for better decision-making?
Yeah, from a decision-making lens, I think what we want to do is firstly understand what question we're trying to answer as a business to deliver strategy, operate effectively, and stay responsive to changes in the marketplace. When we have a grasp of those questions, our data doesn't become as overwhelming. We can narrow down what we're trying to answer and then understand the drivers to help answer those questions. So if we want to, for example, be able to answer the question, how much should I plan for a specific promotion? We know that roughly the types of drivers would be price, your activation plans, the number of distribution points you have. So you start to triage your data to help you answer these critical questions for your business. We've got understand the question, understand the drivers, and identify the data in your business that represents these drivers. That automatically gives you a map to say, do I have all the data to answer these questions? If you don't, you might want to come up with a plan to access that data. Once you've got that framework set up, you need to assign a business owner for that data. Why is that the case? Because the data will evolve over time and it needs stewardship in order to stay relevant and make sure that when you need to make that decision, the data is of as good a quality as possible. Once we've assigned that ownership, then it's time to think about, to sustain this ecosystem of data, what is the governance framework and processes that we're going to put in place for this owner or steward of the data to keep that data in good quality, timely, accurate, and complete. Once we've got this framework in place, the next step is to think about how do we educate the organization on how that data is used in their flow of work to help answer those questions. So if it's a sales team, what tools are we going to give them to help get to those answers quickly and not have to dive into a million different places to try and piece together an answer? You want to be able to answer these questions as quickly as possible. So hopefully that helps give some perspective on the flow of how to get to triaging your data.
Yeah, so I heard, know the questions you want to answer, ownership and ease of access, the keys to answering that question. So thank you. Yeah. Question two, might expand on that a bit more. What are the components of a successful data governance framework and how do they contribute to improved business insights and strategic alignment?
Yeah. So thankfully, there is a lot of material around data governance today. So there's an institution called DAMA, which is the Data Management Association. They're a nonprofit and have created what's known as the Data Management Body of Knowledge. They have a fantastic diagram that helps you understand the scope of data governance. I'm going to walk through it and then go through what I think when you're getting started, other things to focus on so that you can eventually improve your maturity over time. So on the outer ring of the data governance framework diagram, we see things around policy. Policy will be around how your organization going to use data, store the data, maintain the data, and distribute the data. You want to define what the scope is for players in the business so that we're working to a unified framework. Then we want to assign stewardship and ownership. Stewards are the ones that really know this data domain. So you're going to have multiple stewards in your business depending on the data domain. For example, if it's pricing, you might have a sales or a marketing steward. If they would feel the pain if the data was incorrect, that's the way to think about it. They're in it day to day. They understand it. They understand its impact and to the broader organization. The owner is a higher level executive that can help the steward navigate issues in being able to maintain data quality in line with the policies that the organization has. Then we move on to culture change, which is about how the organization views data. And from my perspective, the way to think about culture change is how do we shift the mindset from data is an inconvenience in scooping that we have to maintain to data being an asset that helps us make better decisions. So once people rally around that, you'll find that people want to get invested in keeping that data quality. Then we have our strategy. And strategy is not just about the data strategy in of itself, like the architecture and technical elements. It's also about making sure that, as mentioned before, do we understand how our data is supporting our business strategy? And then we move to principles and ethics. So this is a really big topic in the data realm right now. Using data in an ethical way, you need to make sure that that is well understood. A lot of organizations will have data that actually doesn't technically belong to them. So their customers' data or consumer information. You need to make sure that you're using that data in an ethical way and that it's secure. And then we look at data valuation. Are you able to quantify the value of your data and as an asset? And then we have maturity, which there's 5 layers of maturity, very typical kind of maturity model from connected all the way to integrated. And then data classification. So that goes through all the realms of public, internal, restricted, etc. And also the realms of classification in the domains of data and how you treat that. So it's a very big scope, right?
Yeah.
So if your organization is just getting started in this journey, that is going to feel very overwhelming, right? But we'll go into a little bit later as I'll just explain a little bit more of the model first, and then we'll talk about how to pick which ones are the best to start with. Then we think about inside the circle, we think about our foundational activity. This is basically your ticket to play in data governance. We're thinking about data protection and security. So risk metadata management, which is about the data that describes the data. That helps us make sure we understand how to treat this data and the definitions around it. And then the quality. So that is foundational. You need that to be able to really exploit your data for decision making. And then we think about the life cycle. That's the inner triangle of this diagram. How do you manage the data over its life cycle? Data, just like any other asset, has a life cycle. So you need to think about how we're going to enable it through our warehousing, our master data management, our reference data management. Those are different things. Reference data is more like hierarchies and classifications of data. For example, if I have SKUs in a product hierarchy, the classifications of those SKUs at a higher level would be what we going to call reference data, and countries and defining geography, that's going to be reference data. And then thinking about how that data integrates and operates with other data elements in the organization. So that's about the enablement. And then, as we discussed before, what are we going to do to use the data? Are we going to use data scientists? Are we going to have BI tools? Are we going to start integrating it into predictive analytics, etc.? And then the pinnacle of that is around your architecture, modeling, and design, right? So it's very comprehensive. There's work that's already been. What I want to encourage, because having done something like this in the past, when I looked at these models, I was like, oh my goodness, where's crazy. So from my perspective, for organizations that already have some sort of established data framework, it would be to go back and check your policies, understand if your policies are set up. Are they clear? Do they cover these elements around ethics, etc., and ownership? Checking your stewardship. Do we have proper stewardship for our data in the organization? Because if we don't, we're going to hamstring ourselves. What we often see in organizations is the stewardship of data is siloed into some sort of data management team. That is not an effective way to manage your data, because the stewards should feel the pain of the data not being correct. If your data management team is not using this data day to day to make decisions, you'll only get the pain when something goes really wrong. So when we bring it back to making really good quality decisions in a timely manner, you want to bring that stewardship as close to the data, where the data is created, as possible. And then finally, that culture piece. Start the process of educating people into this data journey and increase the data literacy of your organization. And then you'll be able to take the organization on the path to integrated data maturity. So the benefits overall of having this, once you reach integrated maturity, is really about moving away from feelings to trusting data. When you're ready to make decisions, people understand the underlying infrastructure that supports that potential decision is built on a really good quality framework. So you're not arguing about the numbers, you're thinking about the options and making speedy, good quality decisions.
To summarize, there is a framework. It might be daunting, but there's a method for moving through. But what I'm interested in is that most organizations don't value the data enough. You mentioned you should value it. In summary, how do you go about valuing data and the underlying data?
It's actually fairly new practice. There is, multiple schools of thought around it. But some of the approaches are to start, linking your data to measurable outcomes. If my data quality for sales is impacted 99%, what is the potential impact to revenue? If you have an issue with your data quality, what could be the time to resolve? What could be the net loss that occurs? That's one way to kind of look at and then if you're at a certain point, so say 80% and you get to 99%, what do we think those bottlenecks and unlocks will deliver? So maybe it's improved service levels, all those sorts of KPIs. How do we link the two together? There's also market-based assessment of estimating your data's value. If you were to package up and sell your data, what people be willing to pay for? So we know that data is used to help other organizations make decisions. A classic case is in the FMCG space is your IRI and Quantiums. Yeah, they have a value on their data. And then obviously the software that's used to help analyze that data. So there's those elements. And then there's also the layer that you can put to understand how important it is. What would be the value in terms of risk to the organization if that data was breached? Those are some lenses to think about in terms of helping put valuation against the asset. So off the cuff, that is sort of the realms of thinking around data valuation, but we can have a more technical discussion about it. Yeah.
Well, that's valuable. Question 3, can you share the practical steps that companies can take to transition from unstructured data, such as rampant use of spreadsheets, to a more structured and usable format for decision making? And why is this important to do, considering the new technologies that are coming at us?
When we talk about unstructured, good to just help people understand there is some unstructured data that will stay unstructured, right? So when we talk about the realm of data and structured data is things that you would see in databases and systems that you can pull out and then interoperate to make decisions. Then we have unstructured data that's not as easy to put into warehousing. So they start to go and see like image, video, free text, those sorts of things. Unstructured data is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is data that people are pulling out of systems, reorganizing themselves, and then trying to make decisions off the fly, right? If I'm reading correctly. Yeah. This type of floating around data is usually a symptom of people not understanding the value of keeping really good quality data. From my perspective, this all comes back to getting your data right and building that base of trust. What often happens is the data's not maintained, right? And someone needs to make a decision and they're like, I'm just going to pull this data out. I'll put my business context over the top, which I know is the up-to-date view. And then I'll quickly send out some information for a decision. Now, the problem with this is that there's going to start being multiple versions of these decisions that are being made over time. When you look backwards, you have no idea what base we made these decisions on. My first step in this space is if you get that base data right, you'll eliminate the need to pull information out, fix it in the background, and then send it back to users. So that's the first one. The second one is helping people understand how to use systems to generate output as opposed to leveraging things like Excel. In a lot of systems, you can get different types of reports that can be used to help create decision making. And a lot of software does things like scenario planning, etc. So it's how do you make sure the systems are leveraging that data effectively to use the capabilities of those systems. And then the final thing I would say, so data, if you've got systems that do this sort of stuff for you, start building the knowledge around the systems and how to use them, educate everyone on the process. It's all about getting people to understand, taking them on the journey, because if it's just one person in isolation, they've got the data knowledge, they've got the system knowledge, everything's going to bottleneck back to that person. And so all the requests will have to go back to that person. And what will people do if it takes time to get a response? They'll bypass the system, right? So we want to avoid that behavior by democratizing the ability to access the data, the systems to get these sorts of outcomes. So then as we think about the future, the reason why we want to get into these behaviors is because when we start embedding AI more and more into our daily work practices, it's going to be reliant on good quality data. So if you've created this hygiene in your organization today just to use your current architecture, you're well set up to then start embedding some of these more advanced technologies and trust the information that's coming out for decision making.
That's interesting. And it also goes back to my supplementary question earlier. There's got to be a cost to all that.
It's quicker for me to just pull it all out, manipulate it. But if you added that up across all the different users in your organization, all the times when it's gone to a decision maker and they're like, I'm not sure about that, let's go run it again. That would be a lot of time. And then obviously time equals money. So you can start quantifying these. I've seen in some use cases, people do that time in motion assessment where they go through the end to end of someone asks for a piece of analysis. We go through all the steps to get there. And then we see, was a decision made? If yes, okay, that's the value. If no, how much did it cost to go through it again? And then you start getting a picture in your business and you're like, oh my goodness, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I've done a few of those time and motion studies and they're always revealing.
You have to understand what's the aim of the time and motion study. The aim is not to get people in trouble. It's to just highlight as an organization, are we efficient as possible in leveraging our systems and data to make decisions?
Well, the next question might build on that one. With your agile background, how does combining agile methodologies with structured data practices improve business agility and responsiveness to market changes?
Agile, actually, and I think we've discussed this before, it's actually, from a technology standpoint, it does leverage all those agile practices that we see in manufacturing that have been around for decades. It's all built on that thinking. When we start moving it towards technology, you need to start putting back that mindset of that ownership and product ownership lens. So you don't just have people deal with issues when they occur. You have standing roles in your organization to manage that data set or that domain over its life. The roles are standing and you're bringing the work to the people rather than the people to the work. That's the sort of ethos of agile. We don't disband teams as soon as new data sets are formed in the business. We have that capability all the time to handle it. In a smaller organization, you're not going to have a standing squad, a perpetual squad that deals with this 24/7. You have to think about it, okay, which cross-functional roles will be required to have time in their weekly or fortnightly jobs to be able to handle the managing the life cycle of this data. So that cross-functional ownership and understanding of what roles everyone plays in managing data is the first element. Then when we move through, we're trying to think about managing the data in the flow of work. So building quality in, which is a lean. The way we do that is like, as I alluded to before, how do we get the management of the data as close as possible to where the data is created?
Yeah.
Because you can handle any issues at the source, as opposed to letting the data float to some gatekeeper down the line and then going, oh, that looks weird, let's go back. And, so we're rethinking, how does data appear in our organization? And based on that, where should ownership lie to maintain that data? And when you do this and take that agile cross-functional team, you'll have a business owner and a steward in the business. And then your data management function is there to make sure that the business is complying with the policies and frameworks, as opposed to being data entry, if that makes sense.
I heard 3 Ps: proactive, proximity, and people and ownership.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
The final thing to think about is, once those standing teams are established, to get to the next layer where you're avoiding large amounts of technical debt occurring in your organization because of the interoperability elements, you need to make sure those teams understand how they interact with the other data domains in your organization, leadership all the way through the value chain.
That sort of extends the 3rd P of people. Moving on to our 5th question before we take a question from our client feedback. Taking your finance background and the fact that finance usually own the investment in technology in a business, what do you think needs to change?
Very loaded question.
So,
I think when I view this topic, feel like finance has been defaulted into this position because sometimes it becomes a bit of a too hard basket. On ERP, finance owns that, it's numbers. But realistically, the enterprise owns an ERP.
Yeah.
So when making decisions around what technology should be used for the organization, potentially for 10 years, right? Some ERPs, maybe it's 5 or 6. That should be an enterprise-wide view on the business case, right? We need to shift our view from a certain function owns deploying technology into our business and think more in terms of technology as an enabler to roadmaps in our organization. And if that technology is going to impact an owner of one of those roadmaps, for example, your supply roadmap, your sales roadmaps, or your marketing, whatever they are, you need to then have alignment down those roadmaps, layering into that technology roadmap, so that you're making best for business decisions. And then what changes? Finance start to become more of a governance arm to say, is this investment decision best for business in congruence with those strategies, as opposed to just purely looking at return on investment? Yeah. So that would be one of the first elements. So, taking the enterprise approach to business case. And then the second element I think that needs to change is that often we treat these things as projects rather than assets that we're deploying in our business. When we build a factory, we don't just put the factory in and say, oh, good, the factory's in, excellent, to move on. Right? Finance need to step away from just deploy, and we'll figure it out later, to making sure that the business case improvements that were stated are going to be realized, and take those learnings to help with future technology deployment. Then we start to get a really good picture of what it takes to genuinely realize business case benefits. Did we have good assumptions about resourcing? Did we really understand what effort is required to maintain it? Did we understand the impact it would have to other systems, et cetera, et cetera? So we start to really take ownership of our technology and doesn't just sit there hoping that it's not going to break, and we get that asset mindset for technology and its respective data.
Yes, it was a loaded question, but what I heard was the ownership is with the business, so the whole business, but leverage finance for the insights that could come from doing, a return on investment analysis, regardless of whether it's building a factory or bringing in a set of new planning tools.
The next level you get into is about making decisions. Once you start to put that in, finance can also play a role in technology prioritization, because you've got not just the financial elements, but the strategic elements, like which technologies should we deploy first. And then the other one that you want to start thinking about cost of ownership. That's kind of the next level, because Now that we've got cloud capabilities that businesses can tap into, you start as a finance team starting to think about with your IT function, should we be doing these things on-prem or should we start leveraging the cloud more? And what is the impact to our business when we start diverging away? Because right now, a lot of manufacturers would have a lot of on-premise technology. And then when you move to cloud, you're starting to actually rebalance the P&L, because on-prem often has a lot of capital costs associated with it. When you start moving to cloud, a lot of those costs start becoming operational costs. So is that the right way to manage your business? And how do you start making other trade-offs to account for the change in your expense line? So these are stuff to get really broad as you mature. Yeah, cloud FinOps is the next big
That's
thing for
it.
finance.
All right. And our final question from our client feedback, and this is just verbatim, so it's a bit long. What people and culture changes do we need to make where we effectively replace judgment forecasts with algorithm-based ones? And how can we use AI to normalize forecasts for exceptional and extraordinary factors? That's
a good question. I don't know if you sent this, but when I listen to it, I think someone's been burned. Someone is a bit disgruntled because they feel that it sounds like a lot of the views on their forecasting is based on gut feel as opposed to facts and data. So that is definitely something we want to try and reshape in our organization. Because, and I don't want to eliminate humans from the equation. I think that's a really risky thing to do, because AI is not a human. It mimics human, but it is not a human. It is reliant on human good quality information to train it to then help us speed up decision making. So from my perspective, using algorithms to create baselines of your historical data is a fantastic thing to do. So if you're not already doing that, have a think about how you can implement one of these advanced planning solutions in your organization. The most popular, I mean, actually don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure, but SAP APO is pretty popular, right? That's one that I've seen in quite a few organizations. I think JDN is another one. Those planning tools can help you out a lot. Now, more and more, these tools have extra analytical capability that help you detect anomalies based on history. However, we don't want to just accept the flags as anomaly. So we can use, say, let's go back to that SAP piece. Let's say you just have SAP APO, you get the SAP Analytics Cloud module to help you analyze the history and detect anomalies. What you want to do is then have that human in the loop to say, yes, SAP Analytics Cloud, that is an anomaly that we should cleanse for because we had a competitor out of stock. So we had abnormally high sales, or, there was some logistics disruptions, which meant we couldn't get stock out. That human in the loop is super important. The partnership between the machine and the human. And then we want to so I talk about history. I just want to then talk about judgment in the terms of future forecasts, right? So again, AI can use history to give you an indication of what would happen if nothing changed. AI does not have context about what you're planning to do with an organization. So we don't want to use judgment, quote unquote, which is, we're going to do this extra activity. I reckon it's going to do X. We want to use well thought out assumptions to inform over the top of our baseline forecast what we're going to do to shift that baseline demand. How do we achieve that culture in our organization? From my perspective, you need to have a well-defined forecasting process. You need to understand who is responsible for baseline. What is the interactions to get to that baseline? Is it the AI and human? Is it a planner observation using statistics to look for anomalies? Is it just planners having a consensus and then making a decision? Whatever it is, you need to define it so it's very clear to get your baseline. Then as you start thinking about your future, who owns those critical assumptions around how demand or supply network will be augmented from the activities we're going to embark on? Once that ownership is established, that person is accountable for bringing in the thinking, as opposed to, 6 people in a room go, I think it's this, I think it's like, let's take the average. Why is that assumption ownership important? Because they're the ones that need to monitor if that is coming to fruition. And if it's not, what was different from what we assumed to help us plan better in the future, rather than getting to the end of the month or the end of the quarter and saying, oh, it didn't work. Let's go and do the same cycle again, right? Because this is all about culture building. My recommendation and what I've seen work well is rather than trying to do this across your whole business, get a coalition of the willing to test out this new way of working on a small subset of your portfolio and then iterate. When you've got a process that works well, start educating others to adopt the same process. And you can create that snowball effect.
To summarize, what I heard was it's very clear the machine, whether it's AI or a forecasting package or whatever algorithm, does not make decisions. Humans make decisions. How do we leverage our process and technology to better inform those decisions? People have got to make the decision.
And be accountable for it.
That's a good segue into the assumptions, because those assumptions are written down. Assumptions by definition are uncertain. So who owns them? And then what are we doing with them? Thank you for that. That was insightful. As I said in the introduction, I want to learn and share as we go. That was fabulous content.
And for me, I'm really glad to be here because the more I share, the more I learn, because great questions like coming out from your different clients. Yeah. So it's been great.
Thank you. Pause for half a second. Thank you for tuning into this second episode of Tech Transformation. And thank you, Olga Papageorgiou. We hope you're walking away with a renewed perspective on the power of data in transforming business decision-making. Remember, it's not just about having data, but having the right data. Don't miss our next episode where we'll dive even deeper into practical tech strategies that can revolutionize your operational frameworks. We have Josh Chalmers from George Weston Foods and specifically the application of machine learning at Tip Top Bakeries, giving us a warts and all view of deploying machine learning in the order entry and promising area, in particular using predictive analytics on sales. Olga will also be joining us for the future podcast to bring in the latest information about data management and how AI is being used in organizations for planning. Make sure to subscribe and join us again to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in tech transformation. If you'd like to talk to us about how we can help your business with tech transformation, contact us at information@oliverwight.com or go to our website at www.oliverwhiteasiapacific.com. So let's tech transform with Oliver Wight, navigating today, shaping tomorrow, and giving your career a head start by staying ahead of the tech curve. See you next time.